group. So here we go, it's just loading. Okay, that's live. We're live now. Just start recording anyway. Just wait for a few more people to jump on. Just give it a couple of minutes to load, right? I'm just going to drop my levels down below, right? Hi guys, Paul Seils here with you. I'm just getting myself organised, and I do apologise in advance for the delays today. We've had a few technical difficulties, and we're all sort of rigged up. I've all got my new broadcast microphone. So thank you for everyone for joining us in the group Stop 5G Global. We are recording as well for anyone else that's going to be watching this later today. So we have with us today Ray Broomhall. Hello, Ray. How are you?
Hello, Paul. Thank you, and viewers. Thank you. It's great to be with you.
Thanks for joining us again. So it's been an interesting 12 months. We ran our Stop 5G Health Symposium in almost 12 months ago. That was 7th of July 2019, and we've recently had Josh DeSol's recent 5G Crisis Summit. With both of us were fortunate to be featured and amongst 40 other speakers for that event as well. So I just want to check in with you, and people are sort of dying to know you've shared some exciting news for us in relation to political movements and some wins that you've been having in the we're going to do two parts tonight. We're going to talk generally about 5G, what's been happening with 5G and electromagnetic radiation and the political party. And then part two, we're going to talk about some other things that's been happening and some wins that you've been having in relation to, the vaccine coercion agenda, etc. So can you just comment about 5G and what's been happening in that space, please, Ray?
Yes, well, it's a lot's been happening from the 5G symposium. It was that you shared. There was some questions about whether or not what's the best thing to do to try and halt and to sort of make 5G safe. And there was raised about forming a political party. So in essence, that's what we're doing right now, is we've put it out for membership. It's called No 5G Inc.
Yep.
So if people want to check out the website, it's no5ginc.org.au. And people will see a letter there from me explaining why a single issue No 5G party would apply. And we're also seeking membership, and we also have our policy. So the issue there is to basically form. So far we've got over 700 people who have signed up for membership. We only need 550 to register a party, but we'd like many more, obviously. And the trick is to become, hopefully, with the membership, if we can get people to join the political party, the No 5G Inc., and then we'll register it as the No 5G Party, you'll find that our policies, hopefully, will be adopted by other parties. And that's the key, and that's the plan. So as that we've got to make sure that we get some people in Parliament so that 5G or electromagnetic radiation issues certainly put on the agenda, and also to make sure that laws in regards to surveillance and all sorts of issues are looked at and made sure that the people are looked after more so than the corporations and etc. So forming the party, if you look at the groundbreaking side of it, is that we've got at least 150,000 people on Facebook groups now who are very excited and obviously concerned about electromagnetic radiation. If we can get at least half of those people to sign up as members, we'll become the biggest political party in this country. And the best way to explain it to you is that the Australian Labor Party, for example, has about 40,000 members. The Coalition has about 55,000 members, and the Australian Greens has about 1,600. So the chances of us becoming one of the biggest political parties, just simply by people who are concerned with No 5G, will send a huge wave to a huge signal and voice to the other parties to start listening and realising that electromagnetic radiation issues are well and truly in the fore.
Yeah. Wow, that's really interesting, Ray. It's in the scheme of things, there are 25 million people only having those two major parties, only having those sort of numbers of, you know, would you say 45, 50K?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So the way to do it is we just ask everyone to, if anyone, just simply join our party. There's no fee involved at this stage. Once we become registered, we'll then have a $10 a year annual membership. But at this stage, in order for our registration purposes, we just need 550 members. As I said, we've got more than that, but we have to get everyone vetted to make sure that they are on the electoral roll, and we've just got to make sure that when the Australian Electoral Commission actually contact them, and they'll select out of the 550, about 50 of them, and those people need to be by their phone. Hopefully somebody, they'll answer the phone, and we can then go ahead and get our registration done. And we're obviously, I guess the main thing is we'll be working very closely with IMOP and HAPS and everybody, basically all the smaller parties that are out there. We sort of sympathise with them, and so it's when you go to the ballot box, when you'll see on the ballot box, you'll see no 5G on the ballot box. Yeah. That is our, which is a very important part. HAPS and So what else has been happening? Okay, I'll just we just had a.
So can I just ask you, before we move on to the other things, just talking about the political party, like what's the response been so far? I mean, it's great that you've been able to make the ground. Yeah,
it's been very good. We've had a lot of people inquiring. There's been we've got obviously a committee and a team that are working absolutely spending endless hours on doing this and providing a voice for everyone. The issue there is that you can simply go to the No 5G Inc. So it's www.no5ginc.org.au, and there'll be contacts there, and you can actually, if you've got any questions about what's involved, what they need to do, etc., that's all there. So it's been a great effort. It's been something that we've been putting together for quite some time now, and we finally have our constitution now. We have everything ready to go. So it's just a matter of just getting members, and off we go. Yeah. And obviously we'll be seeking candidates in elections, and those people that sign up as members, we can, if they want to be a candidate, or if they want to get involved and help in elections, that'll be great.
Yeah, I know there's a lot of people very passionate in this space. Like you said, there's probably over 150,000 people. I'm not sure what the demographic of that is for Australians in those groups, for 150,000. I know we have about 10,000 members in Stop S5GG, Stop 5G Global. But what sort of people are you looking at potentially for candidates?
Anyone that has, anybody really that's got concerns in regards to electromagnetic radiation, and they come across as people that have got a passion about it, and they pretty much anyone. It's not really up to me. It's up to they'll put their hands up, and the committee will have a look at it, and then it's really up to the committee to decide as to who the candidates will be, and it'll be obviously a democratic process, and see how it goes from there.
Okay, and then what's the timeline moving forward? Just so for people that are, I mean, I've backed away from the whole political process for some time, and not right across it, particularly since spending a lot of time overseas. Ray, what is it going to be, a state-based approach or nationally, or?
It'll be national to start with, clearly. So we're looking at the federal sphere, but the reality is that even though I'm stopping towers and assisting clients, etc., all around the country, and stopping towers and EMR issues, what's happened is that we know that the government are going to start changing the law to suit to try and counteract that. So in order to stop that, we need to get a voice in Parliament. So that's really what we're trying to do. So this is the next step, I guess you'd say, on the next phase in the movement. We'll be the very first political party in the world, by the way, that is solely using no 5G as an issue. Yes.
Okay, and then what would you say to any of the pundits that would sort of say, that 5G is a very niche? You've got a lot of niche political parties in Australia in relation to special interest groups and that sort of thing. What would you say to people that are sort of saying that it's 5G alone is probably a little bit too niche for people to understand?
Our strength. That's the strength, and if you remember, there was a no dams issue, which was back in the Gordon below Franklin Dam issue in here in Tasmania.
Yes.
There was they classed as the no dams, and you would have seen a no dam sticker everywhere. It was a triangle with no dams in the middle. And basically what it was that it reflected so strongly throughout the country that it overturned the government, and you found that Hawke basically got in because of that. There was a lot of issues behind it, and you'll find that the no dams basically transformed into the start of the Green Party in Australia, and they even still have today the Greens. So what I'm saying to you, and that's how it started, the Greens did. Not that I'm saying we've got nothing to do with the Green Party, but what I'm trying to say to you is that single issue was what put the Greens on the map. The same thing with the Nick Xenophon Party. They started off with no pokies, and that was how that party started, was simply by having a single issue. This is 5G has become a very hot topic. It includes a lot of things, and a lot of people concerned, and we'll see at the ballot box. It's as simple as that. I mean, the membership that we've got so far, we've only been out advertising for a couple of weeks now, and we've already got over nearly I think it's about 700 people so far who have actually signed up as members. So that's fantastic. So, once we become registered, we know that we'll get a lot more membership.
Yeah, got it. And what's the timeline moving forward? I'm not across. What's the date for the next Australian federal election? I know in the US is for November 2020, but when's Australian election? What's the timeline on that?
To be quite frank, I haven't even looked at it yet. We're more interested in just forming the party and putting our policies out. So I haven't actually even looked at that in regards to the federal election. I guess the reality is get our memberships up, get our policies out there. Once we start promoting how many members we've got, we'll then obviously get ready for an election. So we believe it's actually a fair way away before we have a federal election yet, but we're just getting everything in the wings ready for it.
Yeah, well, it's a credit to you and all the people that have been involved to be able to get this far. And you said it's the first in the world for a
single issue, no 5G. It's correct. Yes.
And it's interesting as well. Funny you should talk about that. Like, it has been it's very hot at the moment. It's been getting a lot of coverage. Four Corners, not last Monday, the Monday before, ran a brilliant story on artificial intelligence and how that incorporates 5G. And then we had on Q&A recently as well, including Annika Smathurst was on the Q&A panel in Australia on ABC television. And she was, of course, one of the journalists that was raided recently for trying to expose some of the issues, not only the Afghan files, but also the concerns about privacy and mass surveillance of Australians as well. So it's getting a lot of attention at the moment, and rightfully so, not only for all the interviews that we've been doing over the last couple of years with the leading doctors and scientists and academics talking about their concerns about electromagnetic radiation, but also what I've been presenting and talking about concerns about the mass surveillance and the loss of privacy in the Internet of Things, and electromagnetic radiation really just being a statistical byproduct of the technology.
It's scary, and I think there's a lot. We've got the AI, we've got the Internet of Things, but there's also other things that people aren't even aware of, and that's wireless power transfer, or commonly known as WPT. Now, if I'll quickly explain what's going on. Not only have we got small cells, which are, you've probably seen 5G small cells that they're putting in people's streets. They've also got macro base stations, which are the big 35 metre, 40 metre towers that you see everywhere with the hideous antenna hanging off them. Well, that's not the only things that are radiating us with electromagnetic radiation. We also have what we call high altitude platform stations. Now, they're launched from Wyndham in Western Australia, and they're about 80 metres long. That's 80 metres long. They're equivalent to 1,800 base stations or macro stations. So what you've got there is 1,800 of them. This thing circulates in a 200 kilometre radius up in the sky, not in space, but certainly in the stratosphere. And you'll find that these things are going to be basically being placed around the world as we speak. We'll also have 40,000 satellites, which everybody are aware of, and that looks like it's increasing up to 60,000. And these satellites are also designed, in one particular company is SpaceX, which is Elon Musk. And basically what's happening there is that we'll also have 5G irradiating from there. So you've got your satellites, your drones or your high altitude platform stations. You only have to Google it to see what I'm talking about. We also have our base stations, macro base stations, which are the towers, and your small cells. Now, why are they there? The reason being is because 5G incorporates a lot of other things. It not only does data transfer, but and does mobile telecommunications, but it also does electrical transfer. So it's about sending electricity through the airwaves. And the reason they have that is that they want to basically charge mobile phones without cables anymore. And you see autonomous vehicles are the same thing. So the small cells are designed that you drive through, that the electrical energy that comes through the wireless, through the airwaves, will charge cars, charge your appliances in your home.
All the smart devices, Ray.
That's correct, all smart devices. And not many people understand that wireless power transfer is the key. Now, the problem that we have there is electromagnetic radiation. As you know, it's broken up into two components. We have the electric field and the magnetic field. So you've got the electric field in electromagnetic radiation, but it's the magnetic field that's the problem. In 2002, the World Health Organization said that any children should not be exposed to anything over 0.3 of a microtesla, which is extremely low frequency electromagnetic field, commonly known as ELF, EMF. We're not talking about RF. RF is a different frequency. So a lot of people don't know about this. ELF, so let's have a look at it for a moment. The World Health Organization, under the recommendation of the International Agency of Research on Cancer, realised that there was a problem with children getting leukemia from broadcast towers. In 1996, Dr. Bruce Hocking, who was the Chief Medical Officer for Telstra, did a survey and a study around these 3 broadcast towers in Sydney, and he found that there was a 60% increase in childhood deaths around childhood lymphatic leukemia. Now, that was replicated throughout the world, and it forced the International Agency on Research on Cancer to realise that there was a consistent association between electromagnetic fields, the magnetic fields in particular, from electromagnetic radiation emissions from towers, that they had to come to the conclusion that it became a Class 2B possible carcinogen. Now, in the World Health Organization also adopted that approach. Now, what's happened here is they're saying that children should not be exposed to anything over 0.3 of a microtesla. Now, I've got studies that show that this mobile phone here, which is a Galaxy S7, not so much the S7, but the S5, irradiates at 6,200 microtesla. Okay? Can you see the difference? So the World Health Organization, the International Agency on Research on Cancer, when it goes to magnetic fields, ELF, EMF, is saying that you should not expose children over anything over 0.3 of a microtesla. Yet the devices that we're using, the towers, etc., we don't even know what the towers are irradiating as far as the ELF is concerned. When you look at the APANSA standard operates from 3 kilohertz to 300 gigahertz. ELF operates under that, in the 0 to 3 kilohertz range. They've conveniently removed the ELF component in our safety standards, APANSA. And you've got to understand that we're not being protected by the APANSA standards in regards to extremely low frequency, which is the electromagnetic field, the magnetic fields, okay, particularly with the microtesla issue. You'll find that they're very silent. They're always telling us that RF, which is from 3 kilohertz to 300 gigahertz, there are no adverse health effects from RF radio frequency. But what they fail to realise is that the frequency below that, which is ELF, there are. The World Health Organization makes it very clear. Also, the Specialist Medical Review Council, which was set up by the Veterans Affairs Entitlements Act, basically was a whole group of doctors who got together as a Specialist Medical Review Council from the Commonwealth Government, and they looked at all the studies that APANSA did, or pretty much all of them, and they came to the conclusion that there is sound medical and scientific evidence to include exposure to non-ionising radiation, and particularly radio frequency, as a factor in leukemia for adults. So we have an issue. doctors use the International Classification for Diseases, which is produced by the World Health Organization, and under the International Classification of Diseases, they have one called W90, which is basically what doctors use throughout the world to diagnose and treat their patients. And what they've done there is that that's what doctors use, and there is no limits in regards to exposure limits there. Yet doctors do not use a Panza to diagnose and treat their patients. In fact, the Panza has got on their website a disclaimer saying that the standards and their information, that it is not intended to be health advice or medical advice, that if you're concerned about the health restraints or conditions in regards to electromagnetic radiation, you'll just see a doctor. And that's exactly what I do, is I use doctors to come up with whether or not it's safe or not, and I don't rely on the Panza. The other issue is ICNIRP, and you've probably heard of them, which is the International Commission for Non-Ionising Radiation Protection, and ICNIRP have made it very clear and we have an Australian gentleman by the name of Rodney Croft, who is the chair of ICNIRP. He is a biologist, he has no medical training at all, and he is the one that is telling everybody that it's safe. The issue here is he's in complete conflict with the WHO and the International Agency for Research on Cancer in regards to magnetic fields. ICNIRP is saying that 100 microtesla is safe, yet the World Health Organization, the International Agency on Research on Cancer, says 0.3 of a microtesla is safe. So who do you believe? The World Health Organization or ICNIRP? ICNIRP is an organization that is clearly not a government organisation. It's basically a group of scientists who've got together, and there's debate as to whether or not it's very heavily influenced by industry. The International Agency on Research on Cancer is probably the best guide that we use at the moment. The World Health Organization, and this is to do with ELF, not RF. And a lot of people have to understand the difference between the two. So the other thing that's really interesting is that we have ORSA, which is an Australian organisation of scientists, and they've put the world's largest database together. And in that database, they've worked out all the science that's out there, and they've come to the conclusion that 68% of all studies out there in the world have found that there is a biological effect from non-ionising electromagnetic radiation. Only 24% of those studies showed no effect. So the real scientific consensus is clearly saying 68% that there is a biological effect. For the government and for other organisations to come out and say that there is no established adverse health effects, or that there is no association, is complete hogwash. It's quite reckless in my eyes, in a legal sense, and it's quite clear that the studies out there clearly show a clear biological effect occurring. There's so much I can tell you, but
it is very interesting, and it's so great the information. You're very knowledgeable in this area, not only in relation to law, Ray, but also into relation to the coverage. It's interesting, there was another show that was featured on the feed on SBS television in Australia recently as well, where it seems to be our Panza trots out the same sort of diatribe, where they state that the World Health Organization classifies electromagnetic radiation as carcinogenic, as they also do coffee and all these other things as well. So it's like they seem to reiterate the same.
Well, they keep referring to RF. RF wasn't included as a Class 2B possible carcinogen until 2011. The real basis behind the first one was the ELF, which was in 2002. And even ICNIRP originally said that they were aware that Michael Repicelli, who was the head of ICNIRP back in the day when it first founded, conceded that yes, children should not be exposed to anything over 0.3 of a microtesla because of the leukemia risk. It's a scary thing. I have doctors, medical practitioners that my clients have used who actually said that emissions from towers and from smart meters, etc., pose an extreme risk of harm to health. That's a very serious statement to make. Poses an extreme risk of harm to health. Not a extreme. That's a pretty powerful statement from a medical practitioner.
It is, and it's the same thing. I've been doing a bit of media the last couple of months as well, as ill prepared as I am for it, to the best of my ability. But it's the same thing over and over again. With the media tries to hyper sensationalize it and trying to draw parallels with coronavirus and 5G.
Well,
I've been sort of reiterating the same thing over and over again, that the doctors have been telling us in all interviews that electromagnetic radiation compromises the body's immune system.
Well, we've got something even better, and we're working on that now. And I'm actually working with some lawyers in regards to the immunisation aspect. And I can tell you now that we're working very furiously on that as well in regards, and I've found the link between that and 5G. 5G emits pulsed electromagnetic radiation. It also does not only in the high frequency band, but also in the ELF, which I just told you about in regards to magnetic fields. They're in both, so you get both. So you still get your 2G, your 3G, your 4G, but you're also getting all this extra stuff on top of it. It's all pulsed radiation, and we've got a big concern. But the reality with this is that I'll just explain this nice and simply so you get a basic idea of where we're going with this. You'll find that vaccinations, for example, are always incubated in using other animal hosts, such as chicken eggs. You'll use rats, mice, pigs, monkeys, etc. So they use these animals to incubate the virus for a vaccine. But what they do is that the genome and the DNA actually has latent viruses from those animals that are basically asleep or dormant viruses that can be transferred from animal to human. So when you get a vaccination, that's exactly what the science is telling us. What's really concerning is that viruses can be activated by electromagnetic radiation. So if you've got a dormant virus inside of you, the studies indicate quite clearly that. And the best one to explain to you, a simple virus that everybody knows about, is called the Epstein-Barr virus. Now, the Epstein-Barr virus is definitely activated by non-ionizing radiation. In fact, the best way to explain what Epstein-Barr is herpes. And people, we have that as a sleeping, all of us have that as a dormant virus in us.
Okay, so can I just stop you there and just clarify as well? So we're not sort of talking about any nanotechnology or anything. What we're talking about is vaccines are animal-based derivatives or cultures that are developed, and what you're saying is that then gets injected into the body, and then the the radio frequencies, electromagnetic radiation or electromagnetic frequencies, then have the ability have the ability to activate that virus.
That's correct. So I have studies here that make it very clear that they are activated by the. I'll just use the Epstein-Barr because that's a nice one to say it. But I'll just show you that quite clearly. You can see it there. I don't know if you can read that.
Yep. Exposure to 50 hertz electromagnetic field induces activation of the Epstein-Barr virus genome in latently infected human lymphoid cells.
There you go. Okay, so, and that's just one study. They found that they've always been puzzled why astronauts go in space and they're all in a capsule with EMR, and every astronaut comes back with activated herpes virus. Okay, now, or the Epstein-Barr. Now,
so this is pretty groundbreaking as well, Ray. Is like, how come no one else, like you're sharing this now, which is fantastic. How come no one else has picked up on this previously? Because fundamentally that means that even with what's been supposedly happening with people dying of
here has been around since 1997.
Right.
So it's been around for a while. It's just that no one's picked up on it. The other thing is the bacteria, the pneumonia virus, and this is even worse, is that we have the Klebsiella virus, and I'll just the Klebsiella pneumonia. So this is a study here. So it says evaluation of the 900 megahertz, you can see it there, radio frequency radiation effects on the Klebsiella pneumonia bacteria. Can you see that?
Yes, antimicrobial susceptibility.
Yeah, now what it means is saying this is that basically they found that based on the bacteria that were exposed to radiation, showed faster growth rate in the exponential phase compared to bacteria in non-exposed groups. Okay, so what that's saying is that the growth curve of bacteria, the pneumonia bacteria, was faster in exposed groups. And they basically said that the Klebsiella pneumonia showed a significant growth rate after exposure. So there are plenty of studies on it. There's the effects of microwave radiation on microbial cultures, which has been around for quite a while. This was done in 2012, a full-on study, and it explained quite clearly that magnetic fields are what's causing the activation or the exponential growth of bacteria, the secondary infections. And they found that secondary infections, when you start looking at it since the, I guess you could say, back in the day, you had the 1918 flu epidemic right up through to your 2003 with the SARS, and now we've got COVID-19. I'm not suggesting that it's causing the COVID-19 issue, but certainly the deaths were not caused by the virus, but were caused by the secondary infections of the pneumonia bacteria. And it's really interesting that when you look at when electromagnetic radiation first appeared on this planet, it coincided with a lot of the pandemics in regards to flu back in the day. It's quite scary. And you really
which sort of raises the question as well. Hopefully we can get as much this information out as possible. But why not more doctors drawing the parallel or doing studies and research into potential people that have passed from or with of COVID virus that have been, if there's parallels that people can do the research and studies to find out that they've been vaccinated and they've also been subjected to high levels of electromagnetic radiation.
Well, the studies are there. It's just that you just need to expose them. And then we use what's known as the precautionary principle. Basically means that there's scientific uncertainty as to its safety, then the old term is, if in doubt, kick it out. So, and I've been using that with the towers, for example, that there is a lack of scientific certainty as to whether or not it's safe or not. Well, the same thing should apply with mandatory vaccinations in regards to COVID-19, etc. So it's going to be a very interesting. We're working on that now in regards to constitutional law, etc., to try and find we think we found the answer, put it that way. In regards to mandatory vaccinations, particularly with COVID-19 issues.
Okay, so we'll come back to the vaccination issue as well. I know we we're going to try and split it into two parts, but it looks like it's all going to meld into one tonight anyway. So let's just talk about like where you're at. So you've been having some wins recently as well in relation to, you talked about the precautionary principle, and you also talked about you've had success.
You probably saw on TV there was the Mullumbimby issue with where the council basically put a moratorium on 5G. It was the very first council in Australia that issued a 5G moratorium. Randwick Council had already done that anyway, but and I was behind that. But I was also behind the Mullumbimby matter, which is in Byron Bay. I spoke with council at the request of my clients, which was ECSFR, and we went in there and basically explained to them that even if the tower is already built and it's emitting, you can still issue an abatement notice or seek that, because there's lack of scientific certainty, you can actually ask the council to issue basically have a declaration that they put out what we call a moratorium on 5G. Now, the same thing I did with just recently. We just had another great success in Chittering in Western Australia. And in Chittering, Western Australia, my clients got together, and we then had a good discussion with the councillors. The councillors basically put together a motion, and I helped to draft the motion that they put to the council. And I'll read it to you if you like. And basically it worked. So how it works is that here we had a tower that was already, they'd been fighting it for 7 years, and they then got me involved, and within 2 months we had an outcome, which was great. Now, how I worked there is I used a medical practitioner to come up with a medical advice in regards to being an extreme risk of harm to health. I then gave them my legal opinion, which is in a very lengthy drafted advice as to what they can do, and which was designed really to educate the councillors and educate anybody that read it as to the dangers of electromagnetic radiation and the precautionary principle and the duty of care that people owe and decision makers, etc. Now,
was this also under assault, Ray?
It was over everything. It was over not only assault, it was public health nuisance, or private nuisance. There was all sorts of issues. So it was a whole plethora of them. But the biggest one is that if you've got a medical advice, okay, and that's been provided to a decision maker, and the decision maker decides to not listen to or consider the medical advice and prefers to follow PANSA, for example, then technically which one reigns supreme? Is it the medical opinion or is it the APANSA? Now, APANSA have made it very clear they can't give advice in regards to health or medical issues, and they certainly can't provide advice as to how to treat patients, etc. Doctors can. And the issue there was that the medical opinion, if they use reckless indifference, which basically means they negligently or recklessly just toss the medical report away and just simply follow simple procedures, we're just merely following the PANSA standards, then we have a specific tort in a public tort, which is known as misfeasance in public office, which basically means that ministers, right up to the Prime Minister, your councillors, or even the CEOs, anyone that's employed in the public service can be sued for damage under misfeasance in public office. And that's a very powerful tool that's being used, if that makes sense.
It does.
And so basically when councils realise that where they are and where they sit, they start to think, okay, we've got to be very careful about this, about making a decision, and they have to then look very carefully at the advice that's been provided to them, particularly the medical opinion. And so they have to then decide, do we follow the medical opinion or do we follow a PANSA? Okay. Now, the beautiful thing about their PANSA, when you read the very forward of the PANSA, it'll say that if an emitter, such as a carrier or anybody that constructs or manufactures these things, if they're aware of a risk, a health risk, they're to adjust their practices accordingly. Now, when a telco is made aware of a risk with a medical opinion, do you think they adjust their practices accordingly? Are they following the APANSA standard? Okay, and that is the duty of care, and that is an issue that's raised when emitters have to, if they're going to follow the standard, if they're aware of a risk, they're to adjust accordingly. And basically, they're failing to do that.
Yeah. It's interesting. It's very groundbreaking, and I get to acknowledge you for your contribution, as I've done previously, for the work that you're doing. It's funny too, Ray. I watched a movie a couple of weeks ago, the new Mark Ruffalo movie called Dark Waters, about the lawyer that spent, I don't know whether you've seen it yet or not, that spent 20 years of his life basically fighting DuPont about the contamination and pollution of the land. Yes. In the US. And it's like, is electromagnetic radiation come under jurisdiction of other bodies like EPA, where it's considered to be like a form of pollution?
Yes, it is. I mean, you'll find that most states have it as it's actually known as a pollutant and a contaminant. Electromagnetic radiation is classed as a contaminant and a pollutant, and environmental protection laws do apply. And you'll find that emissions of electromagnetic radiation are contaminants, and you can apply nuisance law against them and environmental protection laws to stop them. Yes.
Okay. So just while we're on
another contaminant, yes.
Okay. And then while we're talking about 5G as well, before we go back to the vaccine conversation as well, like people are sort of, we're getting more attention than ever before, which is great. What's happening in relation to, can you comment if there's anything happening there in relation to further class actions, etc., and legal process?
There is a class action that's currently being, I'm working with somebody at the moment, another lawyer, in regards to particularly the vaccination issue, in regards to mandatory vaccinations, etc. So there is some work that's being done on that. In regards to class actions at the moment, in regards to 5G, etc. Well, that's in the pipeline. The class action side of it will be more on damage. We're currently working on something at the moment in regards to satellites. Just to give you an idea, I've actually formed forces with other lawyers around the world, and I'm part of a group called the Balance Group, which is myself. I teamed up with a Harvard Law School professor. His name's Julian Gresser, and Berkeley as well, Berkeley Law School, and also some other lawyers. And we formed a group called the Balance Group, and I'm one of the founding members of that. And we're actually filed an action in the FCC, which is against the FCC in the United States, in regards to Elon Musk's satellite rollout. So that's currently being aired at the moment. We've already had submissions we've put in. We've done response submissions to SpaceX, what they've responded to. So that's really an interesting development. We've also got the Healthy Heavens Trust Initiative, which is basically, again, in regards to satellites, but it's also against 5G in general. And you'll find that we've set up a very large group of lawyers in the United Kingdom. We've done it with the United States, of course, and also with Canada. And we're setting up at the moment, I've just had a conference with 16 people in New Zealand, and we're setting up a satellite group there in regards to 5G issues. So lawyers, so we've got Australia lawyers, also New Zealand lawyers. That'll be our South Pacific groups. So we're really getting involved in the legal fraternity. So we've sort of been keeping it under our hat, but I can tell everyone and rest assure everyone that we're working very hard to educate lawyers around the world as to the dangers, and not only that, but the litigation issues that are associated with exposure to electromagnetic radiation. And it's been great. I felt like a lawyer in the wilderness when I first started this about 8 years ago, but now I've got a lot of people who are collaborating with me, and it's been an amazing ride. And if anything, the biggest thing has been educating as many people as possible as to the dangers and the legal liability issues, particularly criminal and civil liability for those emitters who don't listen and just recklessly emit electromagnetic radiation on people.
It's been an interesting, yeah. It's been an interesting ride for me as well, Ray. It's like when I first came across it a couple of years ago, I've been involved in different activism in ways, shapes or forms. And when people started talking to me about EHS, I was like, come on, that just sounds like a bit of a hypochondriac, you know, sort of technophobic hypochondriacs. But then it's like some of us are very much more sensitive to it. I'm very sensitive to it now that I'm aware of it. You know what I mean?
If you've got tinnitus, and I've got some really, I mean, it's just, there's so many things that are associated with electromagnetic radiation. Tinnitus, which is ringing of the ears, buzzing of the, you know, a head buzzing in the head, neuralgias. There's all sorts of, you know, headaches. There's all sorts of things. You can even feel the electromagnetic radiation hitting you. A lot of people, symptoms that are similar to fibromyalgia, MS in some ways. There's all sorts of things that people can feel the similar symptoms. They've gone to doctors. Doctors don't know what it is. But there are some doctors that can actually diagnose people with EHS. They can actually say, yes, you have EHS. And what's really interesting is that when they've now, looks like they've found clear markers as to how somebody can be affected by electromagnetic, or they've got electromagnetic hypersensitivity. They can actually now treat it with certain drugs in some form. And what that means is that if they can treat it with drugs, that means we have a marker for EHS. So it's a really interesting thing that's happening. There are blind trials that are being conducted now, and it's just a matter of time before these blind studies, etc., are ready, and we're ready to go out. And I guess you could say we're setting the framework and the groundwork for personal injury in the future. So it's really interesting what's happening.
That's great. That's great, Ray. There's a couple of questions coming through here from people as well. So Amy says, how can we as doctors give the advice about avoiding it when it's not accepted by AHPRA? I'm sure that's a medical body.
They're talking about APRA, which is
the, and then she
the regulatory
continues.
Authority. Well,
and then she continues with precautionary principles not followed in conventional medicine.
Well, are they? That's the issue. I just mentioned the ICD-10, which is what doctors use to diagnose and treat. And if you're following the ICD-10, what's the issue? A good example is if you can't, okay, non-ionising radiation. If I go outside and get hit by sunburn, am I being sunburnt with ionising radiation or non-ionising radiation? Well, the reality is I'm being affected by non-ionising radiation. I have sunburn. So if a doctor cannot treat sunburn, there is something wrong. And basically, that's the best way to explain it. There are certain things that can affect people. You know, people get sensitive to sunlight. There's all sorts of things. But what I'm trying to say is that a doctor should have the right to diagnose and treat their patients and look at the science themselves and come to the conclusion that that's the issue. you only have to look at Physicians for Safe Technology, which you'll find on the internet, which is a whole plethora of medical physicians around the world have got together and have a consensus in regards to the issues and dangers from electromagnetic radiation. AHPRA have so far not made any complaints against any doctors that I know of, and particularly my doctors, in regards to EMR issues. There might be some things that are out there, but at the moment it seems to be okay. The other thing is that it's very, very hard for the federal government to, which is AHPRA is a federal agency, by the way, to interfere with doctor-patient relationships, and that's restrained by the Australian Constitution. And you'll find that that they can't interfere. What we call conscription, which is basically getting involved with a relationship between a doctor and a patient. The states have not given the power to the federal government to make laws in regards to health. And you'll find that they can only provide funding for health. That's why we don't have our public hospitals not under the federal health system. They're under the states. And so for the federal government to intervene and interfere, it's quite horrendous. AHPRA is just a complaints body. It is not the Australian Medical Association. If a doctor is, as the way I see it, if they're following the International Classification of Diseases in regards to diagnosis and treatment of exposure to non-ionising radiation, then what's the problem? And not only that, when they're saying that there is no consensus, well, what about the studies I just mentioned through ORSA, where 68% of the studies say that there is a biological effect, when only 24% of it says that there's no biological effect. And you'll find that they're talking about thermal, but we're also talking about non-thermal. There's oxidative stress issues. There are all sorts of things, that mitochondria. There are all sorts of issues that are happening in regards to electromagnetic radiation. And doctors just need to, if they're, as long as they're, they're diagnosing and treating, if there's been an official document from the AMA as to that this is, how could I explain it? If the Australian Medical Association is coming out and saying you can't tell people this, well, I'd like to hear about that, because I can tell you now that could really produce a huge legal argument against the AMA for coming out with that sort of stuff. And if a doctor comes out and says, that it's safe, then I will be making complaint to AHPRA. Because a doctor, by coming out and saying it's safe when you've got clear scientific evidence that says it's not safe, then you could use the argument on the other side, if that makes sense. Yeah,
it does make sense. That's great. So let's go back, because we've only got about 10 or 15 minutes left.
Okay, yep.
We want to go back to the conversation that we're having. So we were looking at the findings from the report that you were referring to, that we were talking about the concept that vaccinations are created primarily and used with animal waste products. Some people say there's potentially human waste products in there as well, but let's just say human waste products.
They're not waste products. They're actually using, they need to incubate the virus. And so what they need is they need a host. They need host cells, etc., and a host. I'm not a doctor, but what they do is that, what I can see in the studies is they need to incubate the virus in order to produce the antibody, whatever it is, in regards to it, to immunise. And so they use other animal species to do that. And it's the viruses, the latent viruses that are in the DNA that is of particular concern, I think.
Yeah, and then what we're saying then is that once those are injected in their body, then they have the ability to become activated when they're exposed to electromagnetic radiation or EMF.
Well, it's proven that dormant viruses can be activated by electromagnetic radiation. Yes, particularly magnetic fields. Yes.
Yeah. And what are some of the side effects? How does that turn up in relation to people's reactions?
What it does is I guess.
I know you're not a doctor. I know I'm not a barrister. So I know you're a barrister, right? But from your experience.
Yeah, I just use the studies that are out there and what I'm being told by doctors, etc. And the way I see it is that we're clearly exploring it, and we believe that there is an argument that we need to err on precaution and that we need to use the precautionary principle. If instead of just willy-nilly vaccinating, if they're going to make it a mandatory vaccination in regards to COVID-19, that's going to raise some very serious issues, particularly when, first of all, we know that for normally to establish a virus, it takes many years before they can actually say it's safe, the side effects are all sorted out, those sorts of things. But the reality is look, I'm not anti-vax at all, okay? I'm just looking at the electromagnetic radiation issue. People need to be educated and be, if they have informed consent, that they've looked at all the risks. They realise that latent viruses can be activated by electromagnetic radiation. Is that the risk they're prepared to take if they get the vaccination? But to force people to have it, knowing what we know now, it's a big concern.
Okay. So we've got a couple of other questions there to ask as well, but in relation to this vaccination issue, like who's the target? Who's the who's directing this? Who's that legal action being taken towards?
Well, we haven't taken legal action yet. We're putting everything ready, I guess you could say, for that.
Yeah. Are we talking pharmaceutical companies? I mean, ultimately, who's driving this, Ray? Who's
driving what?
Who's driving the agenda in relation to if once that information gets
big
out?
Pharma, you're saying a big pharma behind it. They're one component. They are one component, yes. Yes. So big pharma, you find that governments, there's a lot behind. I know there's been rumours about who's behind it, and I'm not gonna entertain that just yet.
Come on, Ray.
No, I'm not. Look, I've been up to date with what everyone else is doing, and I've got to be very careful on who I can pinpoint it at. So all I can say is that we're working very hard on getting people's rights looked at, and that people have the choice, and taking away their choice, as far as I'm concerned, is a real travesty. And we've got to make sure that people's rights, and this includes exposure to electromagnetic radiation. If I don't consent to it in my home, I don't want it on my home. I don't care if they irradiate it outside of my boundary of my house. Go for it. But I don't want you to irradiate your contaminant onto my home.
Yeah.
And that sort of goes out to, well, I don't consent to have to be forced to have a vaccination in order for me to travel, which basically is constitutionally a problem for the government in trying to implement a mandatory vaccination issue for travelling purposes. So if they're restricting people's travel because of vaccinations, and there doesn't seem to be anything in the Constitution or any powers that allows them to force vaccinations on Australian citizens. And they can certainly do other things under their biosecurity laws, but in regards to forced vaccinations, no. There's absolutely nothing that allows them to do that. And so that just needs to be, we're basically preparing it, and we've got clients who are prepared to start actions in court. So we're basically we're doing a lot of groundwork behind the scenes. So just trying to let everybody know that they're not alone, and that we are out there. There are some lawyers out there that are working very hard to make sure our interests, our choice is abided by. Yeah.
That's great, Ray. And we're also doing some work towards, because there's such a demanding community, moving towards creating and developing EMF-free communities and education, EMF-free homes, and that sort of thing.
Well, I'll just explain something. There's that they already have it. The government is doing it for a telescope. You only have to Google the SCAR project, which is known as the Square Kilometre Array. It's the world's largest radio telescope, and it's been set up in Western Australia. Now, it's massive. It's got over, I think it's about 1,000 square kilometres, but there's within a 200 square kilometre radius from the actual satellite, from the telescope, they have to be free from EMF or EMR interference, electromagnetic radio interference. So what they use is fibre optic cable. And fibre optic cable for the world's largest telescope, so as there's no electromagnetic radiation interference, actually you get a lot more data going through fibre optic. That, to give you an idea, 5G only operates at 10 gigabits per second. Fibre optic operates at 64,000 gigabits per second. So fibre optic is way more superior than wireless EMR. So what they've done with the square kilometre array is they've made a conservation zone where nobody is allowed to irradiate EMR in that area to protect the telescope. And what we're saying is that communities in Australia need to be set up as conservation areas where people can go for refuge from electromagnetic radiation. Ronnie Burns, who was a great entertainer back in the 1960s, I've been working with him, and he's setting up a conservation area in Gippsland in Victoria, where he's lobbying the government to declare it to be a conservation area on environmental grounds. And he's trying to set up a village there where people can come for refuge to get out of the electromagnetic smog. The Schumann resonance, which is 7.62 hertz, is the natural frequency, and we're trying to get the places, sanctuaries in Australia where people can go where they're not contaminated with electromagnetic radiation. So it's back to the natural frequencies that we have.
Yeah.
And just a quick one too. Most of your macro towers, a lot of people don't realise, macro towers are all connected by fibre optic under the ground. A lot of people don't know that.
Sorry, when you say macro towers, what is
your
macro?
Big towers, your big towers that are 45 metres high or 35 metres, you see them dotted everywhere. They're all connected by fibre optic, and a lot of people don't know that. So they're all connected by fibre optic, but to stop, basically it's the cheap way. You've got the big tower, they just don't want to connect every home to fibre optic, which is a lot more superior than wireless. So instead they just pump out wireless. They turn it into a microwave oven, and they pump out microwaves from there. And a lot of people don't know that.
Yeah, so what you're saying in effect, Ray, is that fibre optic is far superior in effectiveness, but it's a commercial decision for them to do it wireless because it's cheaper for infrastructure.
Yeah. The old landlines we used to have, nothing wrong with those, and they're just basically removing them now. And all they have to do is connect instead of putting towers up, just connect us to the fibre optic network they've already got. And particularly with schools. Why aren't they doing it with schools? Ethernet and wired technology is perfectly fine. Of course, you can still have wireless, but you don't have to have it to the extreme that we've got with 5G. Have 5G going through wired technology, not wireless. That's what we're trying to say. That's what the No 5G party is really all about. Use wired, not wireless, because it's the wireless stuff that's dangerous. Yeah,
got it. There's a couple of other questions here as well. So in relation to the doctors as well, Ray. So it's like, where are we here? So as Tina said, where can we get information to give our doctors that are open to this information?
Okay, have a look at my web. I've got a website that I use for the 5G Summit, which you are on too. I think I was the second most popular person on that summit.
What a competition, Ray.
Yeah, sorry, mate. Yeah, just throwing it out there. But basically, you'll see on there, if you go to or just go to EMR Legal Education, okay? EMR Legal Education will come up to my website that I put up, that's been put up for 5G Summit, and on there is a redacted medical opinion there. Okay, so you just go on there, you'll see the talks that I did on the summit in regards to assault and criminal liability in regards to people being exposed to electromagnetic radiation. There's all sorts of things, but basically, if you scroll down, you'll see a redacted version of a medical opinion, and that'll give and doctors. It's really doctors can look at it themselves, and that medical opinion that you see is actually a medical opinion that was for another doctor who was a complainant against the tower. All right, wow. So a radiologist actually, and his wife. He was a endocrinologist, and his wife was a radiologist. But anyway, it's all there. For people to have a look at.
Yeah, great. And Sky's also asked, is it possible to create a global class action?
Well, it comes into jurisdiction, and that's the problem. With the courts, I haven't explored that, but what class action basically means, it means representative action, which basically means that you only need about 7 people to basically set up a representative action or a class action, and there's a lot behind it. You have to advertise to many people to let people opt out or opt in into the action, but you need to have a really good sound basis for that. A global one, jurisdiction issues would probably hinder that. Unfortunately, we're restrained by the court systems. You'll find that the International Court of Criminal Courts, the international courts that are out there, really don't have any real weight compared to your local jurisdictions, such as the High Court or the Supreme Courts, and also your local courts in your states. So, unfortunately, I don't think a global class action could really be effective. But certainly, one in Australia would, yes, in each country, yes.
Okay, great. So we're thank you for your time tonight, and we're gonna check in and probably do like we want to do monthly updates moving forward in relation to what's happening and keep people informed. I've sort of been off the radar a little bit because I've been in transit myself recently. But anything else that you can leave us with that you can share that gives people a sense of because this. Particularly for people that are moving into this awareness about electromagnetic radiation, 5G can feel a little bit overwhelming sometimes. So anything you can sort of, final words that you can leave us with in relation to having some inspiration and hope what we're about to fulfill on moving forward.
Yeah, just to let people know that they're not alone, that the internet's a great place to start looking for, work out in your own minds whether or not it's safe or not in your opinion. There's plenty of resources out on the internet now in regards to the issue. Just be rest assured that there are people out there, people like yourself, who are doing their best to try and make people aware of this. And I think the trick is, in my opinion, I think the biggest remedy that we would have is for people to join our political party that we're trying to form. So if they go to www.no5g Inc., which is short for incorporated, .org.au. If you really want to rally up, just sign up as a member. It doesn't cost anything. Just sign up. That will then give you a voice. And I can stop towers in my legal side of things with others, and we've been successful in doing that. But the thing is that probably the biggest one that we did was and so as people understand it, was the TPG issue in Randwick, in the Randwick City Council. We had Coogee on Dundas Street, 5G, TPG wanted to install a small cell facility within 6 metres of a doctor's daughter, one of his daughter's bedrooms. They just happened to pick the wrong street, because on that street there was 8 medical professionals in that street that lived in that street. And they then engaged me, and I then basically got them to see a medical specialist that specialised in EMR. And all those doctors knew the dangers of it. And what that ended up being was that we managed to stop 900 installed small cell facilities across the country, and also stopped 1,600 further ones. So in total, 2,500 small cells were stopped. And basically TPG pulled out of the mobile telephony system and the whole network and got rid of them. Now, a lot of people are saying it was the Huawei ban that was the real reason that TPG pulled out. But there is a court case currently in vogue at the moment, which is a $16 billion stoush between ASIC and Vodafone and TPG. And the CEO, under cross-examination, made it very clear that medical evidence had been provided, but it indicated that there was a real health risk and a real health concern, and that was the real reason why TPG pulled out. So that's vindicated what I've been trying to do all along. We had a very big win there. So what I'm saying to you is that, yes, there are people out there where we're stopping as best we can, and we're still doing the fight. But to really assist us, there's only not many of us that are fighting this thing. But if you really want to really be effective, yes, you can engage lawyers to stop a certain tower or a smart meter or whatever it might be. But the reality is, let's do it in one big swoop, get everybody together. Let's all be united in a voice. Put your hand up, become a member of the political party that we're trying to form. Let's send a big message. And really the trick is, the more people we can recruit to become a member, the biggest message we can send to the other parties and to the Australian government and the Australian people and the media, for that matter, that this 5G issue is well and truly on the map.
Okay, great. Well, thank you for your time, Ray. I know you're very busy you've been very generous with your time, as you have been for a lot of the community, particularly in Australia, and for what you've been doing. Good luck with No 5G Inc., the political party. It's very groundbreaking to have that innovation come out of Australia and to start setting an example and leading the way. So thank you for your contribution.
Thank you. And just to let you know that the world does see Australia as the leaders in regards to this, not the other way around. So that's why we have so much support internationally. So I just wanted to let everyone know that they are empowered, and we are working very hard to keep and make you empowered. So thank you for having me, Paul, and I wish everybody the best of luck in their fight. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Ray.
Thank you.
Thank you.